There's no personal accountability for these managers, for these supervisors, for these HR folks, for the business owners. There's never any personal accountability when they break the law.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
There is a resurgent labor movement in the United States, and Sweet Home, Alabama is at the heart of this worker organizing. Let's check in on the major labor actions happening across the state, starting south and working our way up. Starting with Mobile, there is a strike threat among dock workers in Mobile, represented by International Longshoremen's Association, ILA, Local 1410. We know how important dock workers are and how important the Port of Mobile is to the supply chain. My understanding was that October 20th was the deadline for contract negotiations. So this story is still developing. Stay tuned next week for more details. Solidarity with the dock workers. In Auburn, there's an active union campaign with CWA at the GE Aviation plant, with the campaign going public in August. There's already been unfair labor practice, or ULP, charges filed, with multiple pro-union workers fired for what they believe was retaliation for their pro-union activity. That includes at least one worker who was pregnant. So stay tuned on that fight. We have a paper mill lockout in South Alabama. Members of the United Steelworkers who work at paper mills near Fort Mitchell, Alabama, have been locked out after rejecting multiple contract offers from the company as they try to hold on to excessive overtime penalties. If you can only read one thing on this, I highly recommend our very own Jacob Morrison's piece with the Real News Network titled "Alabama Paper Mill Workers Want Their Lives Back, and they're giving up $30,000 to get it." We also interviewed one of the local presidents on October 8th that you can find on our YouTube channel. These workers are fighting to protect their time, protect their family lives, and protect their safety. They're fighting to hold on to hard-won benefits that workers across the country have already lost. So a lot of set of eyes will be on this struggle. Back in early August, I believe it was, we saw some wildcat public sector strikes in Lowndes County and Selma City, primarily over the need for a living wage. We'll be looking to report back on how that fight unfolds. October 1st marked 18 months on strike in Brookwood, with over 1,000 UMWA sisters and brothers holding the line against Warrior Met Coal. Of course, we've talked extensively over the past 18 months about this strike. And David, I believe you actually had some good news to mention about the strike regarding their Christmas list. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean it just goes to show the solidarity among those of us on the left. Whenever Jacob reached out to me, I guess about 2 weeks ago, about coming in and helping with the show, I thought I would get some people know. Most people that follow the show probably know Bo of the Fifth Column. He does a YouTube show on a lot of issues, with that general everyday working people have. But he's helped support the labor movement whenever we've called. And so I just reached out to him and said, "Hey, would you come on the show and help us raise some money for the UMWA strike for the Christmas presents for these kids?" And he was like, "Yeah, I don't think that I can be there Saturday morning, but we can do like a pre-recorded show and raise some money." And then like 2 days later, he'd already raised all the money for the.
That's nice. That's real nice.
Everything that they had on their list was paid for by his audience. So yeah, I mean, that's
fantastic.
A great guy. He'll do just bend over backwards for us and all of our folks. And he's in the Panhandle. He's right around just south of Dothan and in Florida. So he's kind of local to us. If you're interested in that type of politics, Bo is a good one to follow because he boils everything down to just average, everyday American speak, and he's just probably one of the best guys that I know on YouTube.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, love to hear that. Love to hear that the kids of these striking miners are going to have a good Christmas this year. So, shout out Bo of the Fifth Column and to everyone else who has donated and contributed to the strike pantry and the strike funds for UMWA. And y'all, don't forget about Bessemer, where RWDSU's campaign at an Amazon warehouse was one of the early touchstones of the labor revival both here and nationwide. You'll remember the first vote was held in spring 2021. The union was unsuccessful, but due to Amazon's flagrant cheating, a revote was held in March. The results are too close to call, with the union down, but with enough votes, 416, being challenged that could swing the outcome to either the yes or no side. So the outcome is still up in the air. We know RWDSU is still there and still organizing, and we send them our love and solidarity. Also up in the air is the result of a Starbucks union drive in Scottsboro. The election for Starbucks Workers United ended in a tie, but also with challenged ballots that we believe would be yes votes if they are counted. Earlier this year, a Starbucks in Birmingham was successful in its union campaign, making it the first unionized Starbucks in Alabama. We'll be looking to report back on how things go with first contract negotiations, especially considering the egregious behavior of Starbucks. Let's see. In August, AL.com reported that Huntsville Utilities employees were seeking to organize with IBEW 558. The workers packed out that week's Huntsville City Council meeting. IBEW seeking a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with management. While not as extensive as a collective bargaining agreement, which faces certain legal restrictions in the public sector in Alabama, securing an MOU, as IBEW has done in several other places, would be a significant step forward for these workers. And just this month, the organizing Huntsville Utilities workers received a declaration of support from the local progressive activist community. The Tennessee Valley Progressive Alliance sent a letter to IBEW 558 expressing their solidarity with the workers, their support of the organizing effort, and their offer of assistance as the campaign unfolds. I'm proud to be a part of the Tennessee Valley Progressive Alliance, and I really meant the words we wrote in that letter. We know not all of those workers are going to jive with all of TVPA's politics, and that's okay. It's about building solidarity and being willing to show up for one another because it's the right thing to do. So to any Huntsville Utilities workers or IBEW members listening, know that a lot of folks support your effort. We recognize that you deserve a voice and that the entire community benefits when you get it. Don't hesitate to let us know how we can help. And there was other good news, especially at the local level. Back on Labor Day, our very own Jacob Morrison was on WFF 48 talking about the local growth of unions. He told Megan Plotka, quote, "The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, has tripled their apprenticeship classes over the last 2 years. Their membership has grown 20% over the last 2 years. IBEW 558, covering North Alabama, is already the biggest trade union in the state. They have thousands of members. Ironworkers 477 out of Muscle Shoals. In just the last 2 months, they have tripled their apprenticeship classes. They have doubled their membership in the last 2 years." And while I don't believe it made it into the segment, I do know Jacob also shared with them that the North Alabama Labor Council is growing, with new unions affiliating or in the process of affiliating with the council. Always love to see more collaboration between the unions in our community. That's huge. I'm proud to be one of several new members added this summer to Huntsville's stagehand union, IATSE 900. There were RWDSU poultry workers in Decatur who saw a 20% pay increase in their most recent contract negotiations. We talked to them earlier this year. CWA 3905 in Huntsville has been organizing in their workplace to defend remote work, among other things, and you can listen to our interview with their local president, Mustafa, from a while back. The machinists out at ULA in Decatur, Local 44, were successful in getting a good contract earlier this year after authorizing a strike and preparing in case one was necessary. We had multiple segments covering the contract campaign if you want to go back and hear more. And these are just the top stories that come to mind here in the Tennessee Valley. I'm sure we've missed some. All of this comes amid some promising news nationally. NLRB filings for new union elections are up, and new Gallup polling indicates over 70% of the American public supports unions. So, moving to a labor struggle with statewide impact, incarcerated workers in prisons all across Alabama have been striking for better working and living conditions and for criminal justice reform. A lot of the reporting we've seen has come from the Alabama political reporter, especially John Glenn, who we interviewed in the lead up to the strike, as well as 1 week into it. More recently from the Alabama political reporter, Jacob Holmes writes, quote, "The Alabama Department of Corrections on Monday declared an end to the incarcerated workers' strike and protest that has affected every major correctional facility in the state over the previous 3 weeks. Reports from inmates contradict ADOC assertions that things have gone back to normal. But backing up, on Friday, October 14th, we saw a significant protest in Montgomery. I reached out to a friend of the show who was in attendance, who said that the rally was really well attended. Ivy appeared to come to the window several times. It was announced during the rally that ADOC was returning all prisons to 3 meals a day. Also on Friday the 14th, the incarcerated workers released a statement where they resolved to continue advocating for change and highlighted reports of retaliation. There have been multiple deaths recently reported across the corrections system, including multiple deaths confirmed right here at the Limestone County facility. There was a powerful statement in the Montgomery Advertiser this week that in the month of July, more people died in prisons than were granted parole. I mean, just think about that. You're more likely to leave prison in a body bag than through the parole process. It's just astounding. Meanwhile, Alabama has been under additional legal scrutiny and national media spotlight regarding its execution practices. A federal appeals court judge literally called it a mess. The incarcerated workers went on strike because, frankly, they are facing a humanitarian crisis. Alabama has one of the highest incarceration rates in the United States, which has the highest incarceration rate in the world. That means inside the borders of Alabama, we lock up more human beings per capita than almost anywhere else on planet Earth. The lasting impact of white supremacy, so-called tough-on-crime laws and judges, backwards drug policies, persistent poverty and underinvestment, lack of rehabilitation, all of these things and more have resulted in the current crisis with violent, overcrowded, inhumane prisons which are under federal investigation. Things are so bad staffing-wise inside the prisons that an attorney who spoke with Huntsville's Way 31 believed that many corrections officers have been sympathetic, if not outright supportive, of the inmate work stoppage and protest. Despite the scale of the crisis garnering national attention, Alabama's political leadership has been completely inadequate in its response, to nobody's surprise. Governor Ivey's statements were dismissive and ignorant. Right-wing media has framed the prisoners' demands as outlandish, and most of Alabama's political representatives have said nothing at all. But the fight continues. Here in North Alabama, the Huntsville Bail Fund, along with close to a dozen other local organizations, have published an open letter to Alabama leadership calling for marijuana law reform in light of the strike and President Biden's recent actions, and calling for Alabama to address the strike demands around reforming parole and sentencing. It's my understanding that protests will continue in Montgomery as well. So stay tuned as this struggle unfolds. If you haven't already, please reach out to your legislator as well as Governor Ivey to share your concerns about the prison crisis and ask that they listen to the cries for help from Alabama's incarcerated population. And lastly, in this segment, I wanted to include a couple stories that don't necessarily feature labor organizing per se, but do feature labor abuse and corporate misdeeds. So we're going to start with the automobile company Hyundai, which is facing reports of child labor at multiple facilities in Alabama. This week, there were some new developments. The COO claimed that they're doing an investigation, that they're going to stop doing business with the staffing agencies that they're blaming for this issue. There were some fines and penalties that were levied by both the state and federal Department of Labor, which Jacob reported on last week. And there's also some concerns being expressed by UAW that maybe some of these penalties are going to end up actually harming the workers involved and not so much the company. So we'll see how things play out there. But at the end of the day, it's just it's just bizarre to see in the year 2022 multiple facilities with a modern car manufacturer like Hyundai using child labor. And the Attorney General of Alabama knew about it for months and said and did nothing.
Bizarre, bizarre don't even is not even a
Yeah.
term that it don't even
Well, there's
it's
some words
just
I'd love to say about it, and Mr. Marshall that I probably shouldn't say on FM radio.
yeah. The fact that the state government knew that kids as young as 11 to 13 were working in an industrial environment. This wasn't Johnny or somebody helping his dad on the farm.
Right.
This was a factory that produces vehicle parts.
Which has been sanctioned previously because of
Yeah,
safety issues in the
from
workplace.
amputees. Yeah,
Right. People literally losing limbs.
yeah. And we've got 11 and 13-year-old kids from Guatemala, Honduras, and places like that. These so-called right-wing reactionaries want to keep all of the supposed illegal immigrants out of the state unless they're contributing to the economic impact with their children.
Right.
Just a year or so ago, I think it was a 15-year-old young man from somewhere around Guatemala, El Salvador, something like that, fell through a roof in Coleman doing roofing work and died. And just another blip on the radar for all these folks. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I mean, and don't come at me and say that you're pro-life and that you're about children when you have nothing to say when there's child labor happening right inside of our state in multiple facilities, not just one, but more than one. I mean, that's just it's extreme, and that's not the only one I had to report on today. We're going to finish up with a company that's as common in Alabama as houndstooth and sweet tea, and I'm talking about Dollar General. You can't hardly drive a mile in any direction these days before running into a Dollar General. So I'm going to quote at length here from the Associated Press. Quote, Dollar General is facing another $1.68 million in fines after government safety inspectors found violations in 4 of the chain stores in Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, the federal regulators announced Monday. During inspections in April 2022, OSHA found dirty and disorderly storage areas and materials stacked unsafely at locations in Mobile and Grove Hill, Alabama, Tampa, Florida, and Dewey Rose, Georgia. OSHA said those conditions put workers at risk of slipping, tripping, and getting struck by falling objects. The company was also cited for fire hazards, including failing to keep exit routes and electrical panels clear and unobstructed, and neglecting to mount and label fire extinguishers. The announcement came 2 months after OSHA announced $1.3 million in proposed penalties for similar violations at 3 of Dollar General stores in Georgia. OSHA said Dollar General has faced more than $9.6 million in initial penalties after 182 inspections since 2017. We will use our full enforcement powers to hold Dollar General accountable for its ongoing pattern of behavior until they show that they take worker safety seriously, said Assistant Secretary for Occupational Safety and Health Doug Parker in a statement. Dollar General, based in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, has 15 business days to comply or contest the penalties. The company did not immediately reply to a request for comment. And that's all from the Associated Press. So we've got Hyundai in the news. Now we've got Dollar General in the news. It's for one thing, it's good to see penalties. I will say that. Pleasantly surprised to see some accountability. But it's never the level of accountability that working class people face from the system.
Geez, ain't that the truth? How many of them's going to prison in the state?
Right.
How many of them's missing meals because of the strike the last few weeks? And nobody ever. That's the biggest issue with the state. The state, and when I say the state, I don't mean just the state of Alabama, but the state in general. relying on them is there's no personal accountability for these managers, for these supervisors, for these HR folks, for the business owners themselves. There's never any personal accountability when they break the law.
Right.
It's and we sound like a broken record, but there's a reason why the OSHA and places like this are never in a union facility, because the workers take care of the facility. They understand the laws, they understand their rights, and you don't have issues like this. It's only in non-union facilities where you have to have the state come in and intervene.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because in a union environment, you as the members, you as the rank and file workers have a responsibility and a right to enforce that contract, right? And to hold management accountable for complying with the contract, for complying with state and federal laws. And that's what you do. And when you have issues on the job that are putting people at risk, that are hurting people, the union's there to fight it.
Yep.
And that's why they want to keep the unions out of these companies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even as a right wing person, even like some of these idiots that's on the radio station after us, the ones that profess that they want limited government. Well, the one way to get limited government is to put workers in charge and quit having to rely on government regulations to oversee these things. What's the first thing that happened at the after the UMWA went on strike? They discharged all the scabs came in. They discharged all that coal, whatever the coal dust is, into the frickin' Black Warrior River.
Right.
What's the first thing? Because these guys are getting bussed in from Kentucky, from West Virginia, from Pennsylvania. They don't care about our standard of living here in the state. They don't care about us fishing our waters, our natural resources. All they care about is making a dollar. The folks that are working here care.
Right. It's their community. It's their neighborhood. It's their way of life.
And they're protected if they do see something and say something. They're not concerned about getting fired because they know they're doing the right thing and they know the union's going to stand up behind them and protect them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much misconduct that happens out there in the workplace because people are fearful of retaliation, because people lack a union backing and a lack of union contract to protect them, and so therefore they don't say anything. They suffer in silence, or they resign rather than deal with it. But it's a big problem, and that's why I think it was important that I wanted to talk today about the rising tide of labor in Alabama, because there is one, and it's spreading from Mobile to Huntsville. And I think now's the time to get involved. If you don't have a union yet in your workplace, now's a good time to start having the conversations.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.